everybody. Welcome to the Evening Reader. My name is Priscilla, and I'm here today to do my March wrap-up. And primarily that's going to consist of talking about the 3 books that I read for March Mystery Madness. The other 2 books that I read in March were Ninth Street Women, which I finished finally in March. I started that back in December and finally finished it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still trying to put together the review video for that one. The other book I was reading, or I'm still reading, is Robin Hobb's Ship of Magic, which is the first book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which is the second trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings series, if you can keep up with that. But today I want to talk about the 3 books that I read for March Mystery Madness. And the theme was Lather, Rinse, Repeat. So I've got my 3 books, and I guess let's just get started. My book for Lather, I'm using it a little bit in a different sense than lather as in wash your hair, although I guess it still could be kind of lather, but I'm thinking more about lather in terms of like lathering up frustration and anger. And that is Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on a Train, which was Highsmith's first novel. I wanted to pick it up because I'm interested in reading more Patricia Highsmith. And so this seemed like a good opportunity, and I had this on my shelf. And this is Highsmith's first novel, and I'll try not to be spoilery. I don't think it'll be very spoilery anyway, because I think a lot of people have read this or seen the movie or seen the stage show. So, and it's a story that's been retold many times since I think this was published in 1950. So, you know, the story's been around for a while. I think everybody's kind of familiar with it, but nonetheless. So, Guy Haynes is our main protagonist, and he meets Charles Bruno on a train. Guy is traveling from New York City to his hometown in Texas. He is going there to ask his wife for a divorce. He married young. He didn't really have anything in common with this woman. He went to architecture school. They sort of were leading separate lives. They've been separated for a couple of years. He is an architect. He has a girlfriend in New York that he wants to marry, and he also has a big job in Florida coming up, and he wants to be free of this woman, but she has announced that she is pregnant by her lover, and so he's frustrated, and he's trying to think about how he can get out of this marriage. And he's traveling on the train, and he's like in a second class type of compartment, so he doesn't have a berth. He's sitting in a seat, and he has brought with him, he's dressed up, and he has brought with him to read Plato. I don't think she says which book it is. I don't think it's The Republic, but maybe it is. But he's reading Plato, and he's sitting there, and it's a very Guy Haynes thing to do. He's a guy who's very much about surfaces and appearances. That becomes clear through the book. And here comes Charlie Bruno, and he is dressed in this rust-colored suit. He's clearly inebriated, and then he collapses in the seat across from Guy, and he has this large boil, like a giant pimple on his forehead. And, you know, she even describes him as he collapses into the seat, and he puts his head back, and the Guy can see the bump like Vesuvius on his forehead, I think is what it says. And so, you know, immediately you've got this picture of 2 very opposite type of people. But, you know, somehow through talking, Bruno, and he's called Bruno through the book, not Charlie, Bruno convinces Guy to come have dinner with him in his berth. And they end up having dinner and drinking a lot, and Guy ends up telling Bruno about his wife Miriam and his whole situation. And Bruno says, "I have an idea. I'm always thinking about the perfect crime, and what is the perfect crime? And this would be the perfect murder. I could murder your wife and you could murder my father. And Bruno wants to murder his father because, well, he hates his father and he has a very interesting relationship with his mother, who he reveres. And he is angry because his father will not give him his money. He comes from a very wealthy family, and his father has put all these stipulations on him actually getting his money. So he wants to kill his father so that he can get at his inheritance and have the money and live the way he wants to live. So I guess I could say hijinks ensue. But I don't think murder is a hijink necessarily. Yeah, I don't think it's too spoilery to say that Bruno carries out the murder of Miriam, and then he begins to lean on Guy to murder his father. And Guy is wrapped up in all sorts of knots, trying to figure out what to do, if he can go to the police, if he should go ahead and do it, how can he get Bruno off his back, how can he get rid of him, and he is absolutely just frustrated and, you know, I didn't ask him to do this, and now he has this expectation that I will go and do this thing, and how he's got this beautiful, rich, wealthy fiance now that he wants to marry, and he has this, you know, he wants to be a success as an architect, but he absolutely just sort of starts to unravel because of the pressure that Bruno is putting on him to go and murder his father. And so, yeah, the rest of the book is basically following Guy and what he does and how he tries to rid himself of Bruno. And it goes back and forth in point of view. So much of the time we're with Guy, but sometimes we are also with Bruno, and from his point of view. And then towards the end of the book, there is also a detective, and his name is escaping me right now. The detective who is he's a private investigator, really, who works, Gerard, who works for Bruno's father. And he begins to investigate things about Bruno and then about Guy, and sort of starts to try to get at the truth. And sometimes it's from his point of view as well. It starts to shift back and forth in the last chapters of the book. It actually, within the chapter, will go between the three of them. And I would say this book started off really strongly for me. I really liked the setup. And at first I was more sympathetic to Guy and his predicament and what was happening to him. But as the book went on, it really started to frustrate me. I'm not the Lather person, though. Guy's the Lather person. But it did start to frustrate me a little bit. I certainly don't think that protagonists have to be likable, but I didn't particularly care for Guy, and I didn't care at all for Charles Bruno, or really have any sympathy for him at all. But it is an interesting study in what people will do and what they will do out of desperation. Highsmith is obviously, she was obviously already really, really good at setting up a situation, and she's very good at setting up, making you feel the frustration, having characters who can manipulate emotions and push buttons, and it's very fascinating to watch. But yeah, the characters are just not very likable, and it was really hard for me to kind of care about what happened to Guy, especially. I just didn't feel any sympathy for either one of them. The other thing that was really interesting about this book is how misogynistic it is, which you wouldn't really expect. Although I guess, I don't know. I know Highsmith had a really difficult she was very kind of self-loathing, and she was a misanthrope in general. And then she had a really difficult relationship with her mother. I mean, you can kind of feel in Bruno's relationship with his mother, and then also with his drinking problem, that maybe in some ways he is a stand-in for Highsmith herself. Um, just in some ways. I don't think she said, "This is me," and it's not autofiction, obviously. But I mean, I can see that, but it really was interesting to me. The female characters in this book don't come off very well, and it almost feels like Highsmith herself, or you know, the way that Bruno is really the one who's pretty misogynistic. Uh, Guy is just like your average, you know, I have to protect my woman kind of guy. Uh, but it was kind of surprising to me. So yeah, this was my Lather book. It's worth reading. It's definitely worth reading. I mean, it's a short book. It's not very long, and you know, it may work better for some people than it did for me. I didn't love it. I think it's 3 stars. You know, it's well done, but I got a little bored with it. So, but it started strong, and then I got a little bored. So yeah, that's Strangers on a Train. My second book, which is so it's Lather and then Rinse, and this is my book for Rinse. And this is I guess you could say this is kind of a true crime book. I think it counts as sort of a mystery, and I'll kind of explain why. And this is The Crime of Sheila McGuff by Janet Malcolm. And Janet Malcolm is, or was, a journalist. She wrote for The New Yorker. And she's just a really interesting writer, because she kind of has this meta approach where she's very aware that she's a journalist, and that she is working with a subject, and that she has the relationship between a journalist and a subject, and she sort of brings that to bear in a lot of her books and her work. And in this case, this woman, Sheila McGuff, was an attorney who had been convicted of conspiracy with one of her clients, a man named Bob Bales, who was a two-bit con man, and she gets convicted of fraud for helping him defraud people. And she writes to Janet Malcolm and says, I wonder if you can help me, if you can help clear my name, because I am not guilty of what they say I did. And so for some reason, Janet Malcolm finds this really compelling, and she decides to go and do her own investigation of this. And it's just kind of bonkers. It's really interesting. It's just kind of nuts. And poor Sheila, she's a real character, and that's the thing that Janet Malcolm just also absolutely excels at character studies. She's just really fantastic. And Sheila McGuff, as far as real people go, is a fascinating subject. She truly is, and I think that's why she decided to write the book, because she was not able to prove that Sheila McGuff did not do these things, or that she was innocent, although she does believe that she was innocent and that she did not really know what was happening. It's so interesting, because Sheila McGuff just believes that Bob Bales, he really is, his cons are so convoluted, but they're so basic. He's essentially, the crime that he gets committed of, which when he goes to court with Sheila McGuff as his attorney, is insurance fraud. And he's selling these insurance charters, these old insurance charters that say, that sort of grandfather regulations. Like, it says you can sell this insurance, and this insurance is outside of all of the regulatory laws and actions that exist now for insurance companies. So it's very complicated. It's very complex. And Sheila McGuff gets involved because she agrees to let Bob Bales these people who were paying him to buy these insurance companies, this whole fraud, to hold money in escrow for payment of these companies. And but it's so convoluted. It's just mind-boggling how nuts it is. But it's also mind-boggling how this guy just has a record that's like 10 miles long. Forgery and real estate scams, and just almost anything, nursing home scams, just almost anything that you can think of, this guy has done. But every single person, even people he's defrauded, say that he's the most charming man. He's so charming. And he was also very sick. He was very ill. He had diabetes. He had a lot of problems with his eyes. And Sheila McGuff just felt very sorry for him. And she also, though, felt really bad that she failed him as an attorney, and that she lost his case for him. And throughout the whole thing, she kind of just really says, well, I don't know that he's that bad. I think he was just a businessman. And and even if he did do some things that were bad, he had his reasons, and he was very sick, and they wouldn't take care of him. And she's just kind of mind-bogglingly naive. And it just drives Janet Malcolm absolutely crazy. And it's interesting also because Sheila McGuff has decided that when she gets convicted, or when she gets taken to trial and then convicted of fraud, of being conspiring with Bob Bales to defraud these people, she says it's not his fault. It's not because he's a con man. It's because the government is corrupt and the government wants to punish her. And she's a nobody. It just doesn't make any sense. What she's saying doesn't make any sense, but it's got a lot of echoes of things that we're hearing today about government, and those sorts of this was published, I think, in 1998, but it's like whispers of that crazy government conspiracy theory stuff that we're hearing a lot of it now. So yeah, this was really fascinating. And Malcolm she can't get over how naive this woman is, just absolutely, and she's just adamant throughout the entire time that Malcolm is involved with her in investigating what's happened to her. She's just adamant that it's the government that's after her, and that Bob Bales he's not a bad man, and he was not doing anything that was necessarily wrong. He was just a businessman. And it's interesting, Malcolm writes, con men are not businessmen manqués. They are not businessmen at all. They are in an entirely different line of work. They are not called con artists for nothing. They are called con artists precisely in recognition of the qualities they share with regular artists, which are 1. Love of solitude, 2. Love of freedom, 3. Dislike of authority, and 4. Extraordinary powers of daydreaming. The clientele for con art has never been large. It is a specialized clientele made up of people who are dreamers in their own right, people for whom the fantasy of getting something for nothing, or close to nothing, is so powerful that it frees them from the constraints of common sense. And at the beginning of the book, it's fascinating because she finds evidence immediately that one of the witnesses in Sheila McGuff's trials basically lied, because he says that that there was a number that he saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal, and that he called the number. It was about these insurance businesses being for sale, and that he called the number, and that he talked to somebody. And then the ad is also in the legal file, and the ad, there's no phone number. It's a P.O. box. It's please write to this P.O. box. And the attorneys, if that had just come up at trial, if they had just looked at what was actually in the file, this woman never would have even gone to jail. She went to jail. So, yeah, it was an interesting one. This book talks a lot about how trials are won, how stories are built. Like she says here, trials are won by attorneys whose stories fit, and lost by those whose stories are like the shapeless housecoat that truth, in her disdain for appearances, has chosen as her uniform. So, yeah, it's just a fascinating character study and a really interesting study of, I guess, the justice system. Yeah, so, yeah, that was a good one. My third book for March Mystery Madness was, and it's my repeat, is Finley Donovan is Killing It. And I'm using that one as repeat, because it was fun. It's a cute book. So Finley Donovan is a writer. She is divorced recently from her husband. She's got 2 kids. She's under all kinds of financial strain, and she's got all kinds of problems. And she goes, she's got a book deadline, and she hasn't been writing. And so she goes to lunch with her agent, and her agent is telling her, if you want the funds, you've got to get it done. And they're having this kind of conversation that's very shorthand, like you would have with somebody that, where you both know what you're talking about. And a third party overhears and believes that they're talking about Finley doing a hit on somebody. And she passes her a note and says, $50,000 to kill my husband. And, so of course, Finley calls the number, and she somehow gets roped into a whole thing where, she gets wrapped into becoming a hit person, and her nanny / babysitter becomes her partner in crime. And it's very cute. It's very cute. I mean, I could see this becoming a TV series, and it kind of reminded me in a way of that show, Good Girls. If you've seen that, it has Retta and Christina Hendricks, and I can't off the top of my head remember the third woman's name. I feel bad because she's got a good character. And they get involved in money laundering, but it's sort of similar, that they have some real financial issues, they've got problems, and they get sort of caught up in this web of crime, and they're not really ready for it, and they don't really know what they're doing. And Finley and Vero are really pretty much the same way. Like they get caught up in this web of things happening, and things just keep happening and keep happening. It's just like layer upon layer upon layer. And so that's my repeat, and also that this is the first in a trilogy, so there will be there's 2 more books. There already are 2 more books. I think it's just going to be a trilogy, but I'm not sure if if El Cosimano is going to do a 4th Finley Donovan book. I haven't heard that. So it was cute. It was worth picking up, a light read. It was like a 3-star read for me. Yeah, I guess I think this one was more of a 4-star read for me, just because, and maybe it was just for me because I like Janet Malcolm so much, and I really like the way she presents people and places, and how I like that meta approach to being very aware of what's going on and what's true and what's not true, and to who, and who's telling what story and why. I always find that really fascinating. So yeah, that was my March Mystery Madness. So have you read any of these, or do any of these sound interesting to you? And did you participate in March Mystery Madness? If you did, let me know what you read, or what your favorite read was, maybe in the comments below. And yeah, I guess I'll be back later in the week, even though it's already April. I'll be back maybe to talk about, I'm going to steal that term, pile of possibilities. I think I don't know where that comes from, but I'll blurb it there. I'll talk about my pile of possibilities for April and what I might read for Trans Girl April and People April and just April. Okay. All right. And yeah, if you enjoyed this, please like. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And yeah, I would love to hear from you in the comments as well. And have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Bye.